The design work that went into that mystery motor became the foundation of the Mark IV big block, the 396, the 427, the 454. Every legendary Chevy big block that came after traced its DNA back to that strange engine that ran at Daytona in 1963. Now think about what that means. If Chevrolet engineers were willing to build an entire secret 427-cylinder head program and run it at the biggest race in America, what else were they doing in the dyno rooms back home? The answer lives in stories that are harder to verify. Stories about welded exhaust manifolds, about cobbled-together pressure systems, about engines that ran for 40 seconds before something exploded and the test cell filled with smoke. Most of the real innovation didn't happen inside GM buildings. It happened in independent shops. Smokey Yunick's best damn garage in Daytona Beach, Mickey Thompson's facilities in California, Bill Thomas race cars. Dozens of smaller operations scattered across the country. These men were friends with Chevrolet engineers. Parts moved through unofficial channels. Ideas the corporation couldn't openly support got tested in private shops. And when something worked, the knowledge would quietly flow back to Detroit. Some of these shops did experiment with forced induction. Smokey Yunick, in particular, was famous for trying ideas decades ahead of their time. He built turbocharged engines, supercharged engines, cross-flow heads, tunnel rams, variable valve concepts. Some of his work was documented. A lot of it wasn't. And here is where we have to be honest. The public record is thin. There's no confirmed paper trail proving Chevrolet ran full-scale turbocharged big blocks at Daytona in secret. We can't fully verify the wildest stories. The men who could have confirmed them are mostly gone now. But the engineering culture absolutely existed. The friendships were real, the skills were real, and men with the ability to weld up a turbo manifold and braze together a custom intake plenum were doing serious work in private garages while the official racing ban was still sitting on paper. The question was never whether they had the curiosity. The question was whether the technology of 1963 could keep up with their imagination. And the truth is, it couldn't. Turbocharging in 1963 was not turbocharging today. The metallurgy wasn't there. Turbocharger turbine wheels had to survive exhaust temperatures over 1,400 degrees while spinning at incredible speeds. The bearings of the era, simple journal bearings fed by engine oil, would burn up under hard racing use. Imagine the scene: a test cell at the back of a Detroit engineering building, the big V8 strapped to the dyno, the homemade turbo housing welded together by a guy who learned the trade in the Navy. The engineers crank it up. The boost gauge climbs. The exhaust manifold glows red. The compressed intake air is so hot it could cook your hand from a foot away. And then it happens. A connecting rod lets go. The block cracks, oil sprays across the test cell. The kill switch slams down. The room fills with the sharp burning smell of scorched metal and atomized lubricant. The engineers look at each other. They've been here before. They make notes. They schedule another test. They go home at 3 in the morning. Because the wastegate technology was primitive. Boost control was approximate at best. On a hard pull, a turbo could go from making no boost to making too much boost to popping a head gasket in about 2 seconds. Because the intake air got incredibly hot, modern turbo systems use big intercoolers to cool that air before it hits the engine. In 1963, real automotive intercooler technology barely existed. Hot air carries less oxygen. It also makes the engine prone to detonation. Detonation cracks pistons, burns valves, snaps rings, because the engine oiling systems weren't built for it. A turbocharger generates enormous heat. That heat soaked back into the bearings. The oil thinned out. Engines designed for naturally aspirated use would lose pressure under boost. Spin bearings, throw rods, strip themselves apart in seconds. And then there was the carburetor problem. This was the carburetor era. Pressurizing the inlet of a carburetor, a device designed to work with atmospheric air, was its own engineering nightmare. Fuel would foam, float bowls would pressurize. The whole system fought against being force-fed. So when we talk about Chevrolet engineers experimenting with turbos in the early 60s, we have to be honest about what that meant. They weren't building anything close to a modern boosted engine. They were fighting the limitations of their era. Most of those experiments probably ended with broken parts and notebooks full of hard lessons. That doesn't make the work less interesting. It makes it more interesting. Because every modern turbocharged Corvette and Camaro stands on a foundation of failures that came before. And while those experiments smoked away in basement test cells, the pressure on the track kept climbing. By 1964, Chrysler unleashed the second-generation Hemi in NASCAR. 426 cubic inches of hemispherical fury. The Hemi cars were faster than anything else on the superspeedways. Richard Petty won 27 races that year. The Hemi was so dominant that NASCAR eventually changed the rules to limit it. Ford was throwing serious money at racing through the FE engine family, the 427 high-riser. The single overhead cam 427, a real engine that was built, tested, and then banned by NASCAR before it could compete. Chevrolet